Welcome everyone to our Media Changemakers conversation today. My name is Laura DeNardis, the Interim Dean of the School of Communication at American University. We are joined today by a wildly accomplished alumnus of our school, Barry Josephson, a veteran of the entertainment industry with a wealth of experience across film, television, and music. He is the president of Josephson Entertainment and has held previous positions ranging from being a successful talent manager, which sounds really interesting, to president of production at Sony Pictures. His credits, Barry, if I may say, they kind of read like a pandemic movie list. People are watching a lot of movies, and they are definitely watching these. He did the critically acclaimed film Enchanted, starring Amy Adams and Patrick Dempsey. He did The Lady Killers, starring Tom Hanks, the family adventure film Aliens in the Attic, the thriller Hide and Seek, starring Robert De Niro and Dakota Fanning, some romantic comedies, some international hit comedies like Dirty Grandpa, starring Robert De Niro and Zac Efron, Wild Wild West, starring Will Smith, The Last Boy Scout, starring Bruce Willis, Ricochet, starring Denzel Washington. I could go on and on and on with his movie credits, but also television. Barry has produced, I'll just name a couple of them. Bones on Fox, which aired for 12 seasons, and I know most viewers will be familiar with that, as well as AMC's period drama Turn, Washington Spies, and I'm coming to you today from Washington, D.C. He lives in California with his wife, Brooke, his daughter, Shira, and his son, Murray, who I've all had the pleasure of meeting. I want to welcome you, Barry, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Happy to do it. Happy to do it.
I wanted to ask you, I mentioned that it kind of reads like the movie hit list for people who are, staying sane during the pandemic, during lockdown. You've done so many different projects in so many different media, but what have been some of the projects throughout your career that you have enjoyed working on the most?
Well, it's interesting, when I made Bad Boys as an executive, that was, I think, released in 1993. I didn't know it would have the life that it has had with its sequels, the most recent sequel doing so incredibly well. Men in Black also, it seems like it's had a real resurgence, the original movie now being viewed online. And, I think we're all going through this experience where we now really realize that streaming is this incredible library, whereas we used to have, DVD collections and so on, and we all go back to our bookshelves for certain books. But now, that you have this deep library, whether it be on Hulu or Amazon or Netflix, and you're able to go back and watch all this great, these great movies. And I think that's great because I have always thought with the explosion of streaming series, there's also all these great movies out there. It's so great that people who have made series, people can go find certain series. Like I got caught up watching Schitt's Creek. I had not watched that show originally, and I just think it's the best comedy I've watched in years. But in terms of motion pictures, that there are like these really incredible nuggets out there for people to take advantage of and go back in time and look at the original Men in Black, or go back and look at Patton, or go back and look at The Godfather, go back and look at Amadeus, go back and look at all these movies that perhaps people didn't watch in their original cycle. So it is a really great sort of golden age for people to go back and stream. And because of the pandemic, the idea of new movies coming out every Friday, yes, there are releases streaming of new films that are terrific, but in order to fill the void, people are going back and looking at so many other movies, and I think that's great. It's just so many great films to watch. And in terms of series, the Turn Washington Spies show that I produced for AMC has done incredibly well on Netflix. People searching for themes, so people search for, things about the American Revolution. They find documentaries, but they also find Turn Washington Spies, which has done so well. I think that's another really great thing, that, you have that ability to have this library of streaming shows and movies where you can break down into genres and search and just find this window of incredible movies. So it's one thing to go on to Netflix and see things that are recommended for you or what's trending, but then also, you can look for a certain genre and boom, there's all of these choices, which I think is just fabulous. So the pandemic obviously is not any way that we all want to live, but I think it has led people towards, forms of entertainment and shows and projects and movies that they would not have seen normally.
And they watch them over and over again now. It's not just a one-time view. One thing that struck out to me in your office is that you have that chart. It's a very detailed chart that choreographs the scene in Enchanted in Central Park.
Yes.
It maps out the entire thing, and it's so intricate, and it sticks out in great detail in my mind. But part of that is just the representation of normal life, people wandering around Central Park too, and it was a different time than we're in right now during the pandemic. And I wanted to ask you about the relationship between the entertainment industry and the pandemic. The industry has had a lot of exogenous shocks in the past that have affected either production or shaped the direction of the industry itself. And I know you've done a lot of thinking about this, but where do you think this is going to go? How is it affecting the industry, and will it have any long-term effects?
Yes, I mean, I think, if you look at that scene in Enchanted, it's a long sequence of people gathering from their different lifestyle experiences in Central Park, all to come together in this one great number that finishes at Bethesda Fountain. You couldn't possibly do that now because people can't gather the way you would need for that kind of scene to be shot or to be experienced. So, it's a very different time. And, you could see now people sitting in Central Park in circles, all separated. It's sort of sad, masked, socially distanced, disinfected. We're living in a very different world, so you would not sort of see that scene. But I do think, hopefully if people can remain safe and the curve can flatten and there can be a vaccine, can all sort of see that day again. But right now, it's sort of hard to imagine. And there's forms of entertainment when you're watching a TV commercial and you see, a woman running and jumping onto a bus, no mask, freedom to gather and be with people. It's almost like that commercial so not in keeping with what is around us and what is the other imagery we're seeing. It has been interesting for me to see commercials, especially being made for our current times of how we're living now. And I think you will see that in films that get produced. You will see that in films. It will become a theme. It'll be part of of a procedural story. It'll be part of, a narrative. So obviously, these times that we're living in are going to explode onto the screen. And hopefully it's, obviously a lot of entertainment has to do with escapism, and the idea of like taking off to some other place. And we'll see what that balance is in the entertainment that's being produced now.
And a lot of your movies are both entertaining, but they also make people think deeply about the way that they live and learn something about history and connect into contemporary issues. We're living in a time right now of, it's a confluence of things that may never happen again with a once-a-century pandemic and the protests that are happening and the reckoning with racial injustice and the political environment. It will be really interesting to see. Will there be another set of movies about pandemics? Will there be? It's just, I'm sure that will enter the lexicon in some way.
I think that people are always going to make wish fulfillment movies that have nothing to do with the pandemic, that have to do with how I wish I could live my life or the fantasy elements of things. But I do think, yes, I think we're all experiencing something so profound. We all have different ways of dealing with it. Some people don't deal with it well. Some people want to be in denial. Some people want to observe very carefully their health. I think that film and TV will embrace this moment in a major way. You will see it reflected, I think, in many forms of entertainment. However, there will be just through-line stories, dramas, comedies, so on, that just are the way they've always been, which is, how can you take me away into this story? that has nothing to do with our current times. So we will have a balance. There's no question. And, but there will be shows and movies that will address this period of time, because it is obviously for this generation and generations before it, for people who, were not as impacted by this kind of pandemic. There'll be some forms of entertainment that reflect it.
Well, the students at American University they just started taking classes online. Thank goodness we have the internet to connect in, and it helps people to work and take classes and stay connected and keep people socially engaged. It's hard to imagine what this environment would be like without that, and it's why we can meet today and do it this way and have this conversation. But you've been connected, very connected to American University over the past decade plus. You've visited campus a lot. You've spoken to students. You have participated, of course, in the LA intensive program, bringing students to LA and learning about the industry. And you've even hosted them in your beautiful home. And thank you so much for that, for giving of your time that way and your expertise. I wanted to ask you if you could say a little bit about your connection to American University, and just give some, is there anything that you could reflect on either from your time at American University or your time since then that makes you stay so connected and give back so much to the community?
First of all, I just want to mention that because a friend of mine, Rich Baumer, who is also an AU alum, we were talking about the fact that we are now dressing like we did in college because of the pandemic. This is my normal outfit with pajama pants or athletic shorts. So this is exactly how I rolled out of my home in Bethesda and got to campus, was in an outfit just like this. AU meant a lot to me. It was, for me, past my freshman year, my freedom to choose subjects that allowed me to explore and open up my mind into other things. I think the university provided a great variety, even though I was a poli-sci major, of other things to study. I took one film class. I took a class in forensics. Both of those classes impacted my future in a major way. My fascination with forensics then led to my fascination with procedurals, like movies like In the Line of Fire, Air Force One, or making the TV series Bones. I also think that, when I look at that one film class, it opened up my mind to European movies. I'd never seen Bicycle Thieves until I was in that class. I didn't look at a lot of classics, The Red Balloon, until I was in that class, which, all of that was very impactful for me. And then when I think about my studies, my studies allowed me to have extracurricular interests, like working, on Capitol Hill, or working for a new consumer group that Ralph Nader had started. All of this was through my classes and my professors and so on. And, I remember having a survey research class that we did actual polling, and just being in a class where I'm learning, about the makeup of America and demographics and so on, this statistical analysis, and then actually doing it was so fantastic. And, things that have stayed with me all my life, things that affect me, just studying, reading, history, going to the Library of Congress to research for some of my classes. Before, when I was in college, there was no internet. So it was, I think, just profound in terms of the classes that I took that I had to take, and then the things that I had choices for. I loved being on campus. I really did like my professors very much. I remember being sort of by junior year, still not knowing what I wanted to do, but I was thinking about law school. I did apply to law school. But I remember talking to my professors a lot about my focus, and then also how lost I was in terms of what I saw for my future. And then I had the opportunity for 2 years to work on the concert committee, which is something I chose to do. My friend Larry Seisler mentioned that there was an opening, and he knew that I had this cultural background of knowing a lot about contemporary music and comedians and so on. And so that opportunity also on campus, at school, as a choice, as an elective opportunity, was fabulous for me. So I would say when I look back on AU, what it gave to me all of these different opportunities and the confidence that I could be an individual, the confidence that people would support me, the confidence that, I could be entrepreneurial, the concept that I could, get out of my education so much more perhaps than what I thought when I arrived on campus my freshman year, thinking this is just going to be more books, more classes, more professors, certainly a lot of great learning. However, what else can I get from the experience? And I think I really did get a lot from the experience. And I really commend, the way the system was set up and also, of education and of choice. And I think when you go to college, I think when you're a freshman, you don't know necessarily, it's so early in the curve. You can go very well intended and know I'm in the business school because I'm going to be an accountant. And there are many kids who do that. But I think the idea that you can go to a school where you're not sure or you change your mind, midstream or at any point, and that there is, a university there to support you in that discovery, in that learning, in that growth of who you are. That was, I think, a reason why I like to stay connected to the school. And for those that are interested in communications and entertainment, I do want to give back because I remember people influencing me.
The students on campus now most of them are not on campus, but the ones that are taking courses now are facing a lot of challenges that hopefully will be short-lived. The same challenges that you and I are facing, and many people around the country and the world. But what advice would you give for students as they are tackling various courses and learning how to produce things and learning how to do screenwriting and learning and just taking courses remotely? What do you have any advice for them to get through this period of time and thrive? And then anything in particular about any advice to aspiring filmmakers?
Oh, that's a lot. I think that when I was in 10th grade, I remember struggling with, I can't remember whether it was calculus or trigonometry, whatever, some math that was frustrating for me. I remember my teacher, Mr. Baker, saying, "Do you realize, Barry, that the entire New York City traffic light system is based on an algorithm? That you can't just randomly let these things happen. The cars will just smash into each other." And I remember thinking, well, yes, that really does impact me. And I started to think about, how did these avenues run? How did these streets run? How does this all work so that it could possibly, lead people in and out of intersections in a safe way? And yes, that must be a quite sophisticated algorithm. And I remember thinking too that, when I got to college, this notion that, there's a lot of discovery. My recommendation always is, okay, you are at this institution for 4 years, let's say. You should know your community. You should expand on your studies by being tethered to your community as best you can. So if you are, a business major and there's just every kind of international business in DC, figure out a way for an internship to apply yourself in the things that you're studying so you can see the practical application. I briefly worked on Capitol Hill in Senator Javits's office, reading constituent mail. And I remember thinking, wow, Senator has to answer all of these requests, maybe not all of them, but be aware of what people are thinking and saying. So, and when I worked for a lawyer named Peter Gruenstein in this startup for Ralph Nader, the idea was I'm applying myself. I'm becoming a better writer, becoming a better researcher by having this, opportunity of this internship. One article I wrote for their newsletter was then published in a newspaper, and I thought that was incredible, to have that experience of having written something, been rewritten, gotten notes editorially. What a great experience that was for my work that I was doing at school. So I think one thing I always recommend is try to make more than one independent movie. If you're, studying film, make 10 of them, volunteer. Even if it's not your movie, go hold, a boom pole for sound for somebody, go work in the camera department, go do anything that you can in locations, or just work on as many films and TV projects that there are. So for me, when you're going to school, if you're proactive, if you're jumping into, as much work as possible, that is a practical application of the thing that you're studying. Well, if you're in Washington, D.C., you have the ability to step into anything extracurricular and curricular that allows you that ability to touch, feel, experience, apply yourself in ways of the work that you're studying. And then that way, those things that you're studying become so much more practical when you're out there in the field. So for me, when I first was working on films, when I left being a manager, all I wanted to do was be on set as much as possible and learn what every department does, what every key person in that department does, so that I understood it. As a producer now, there's no line item I look at, there's no opportunity of supervising other people where I don't know exactly what their job is and what they should be doing and spending and how much crew they need and so on.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this Media Changemakers discussion today, Barry Josephson, and I look forward to when we can meet actually in person.
Appreciate it. Me too. I really do look forward to that. I think we all do.
Okay, thank you so much, Barry.
You're welcome. Thanks.